Okay, now that we've finished all that pinning, we are ready to sew our pages. Now I've just prepared my sewing machine. I've put it on a 2.4 stitch length, just normal straight stitch. I have a grey thread in the sewing machine and I've just set it to medium speed. I've attached my walking foot only because we're sewing through a couple of layers of fabric with the wadding, and the feed dogs and the walking foot will help feed the top layers of fabric through at the same rate as the bottom layers. And if your machine has this function, this adjusts the foot pressure. I've just changed the foot pressure to a 2, which is what's recommended if you're doing any quilting type sewing, which is what we're doing pretty much with the wadding. Okay, we are ready to sew. Alright, so I'm going to start where we put the first double lot of pins, and the pattern here allows for a 1/4 inch seam, so I'm just going to guesstimate, and I'm just going to make sure my fabric stays lined up with this kind of edge on my foot here. I'm going to take those pins out. I'm going to set my machine to start and stop with the needle down. Okay, so we're going to sew a couple of stitches and then just do a reverse stitch. Now as you're sewing, I'm going to remove the pins, but also just keep an eye out for where the bottom layer edge is as well. Sometimes when you're doing these fabric books, the edges don't quite line up, so you might just have to make a slight adjustment depending on where that edge is. If you need to bring your stitch in a bit more just to make sure that you're picking up that bottom layer as well, then do that. Okay, now that I've got to the corner, I'm just going to do one more. So I'm about 1/4 inch away from the edge. So my needle is down, so all I'll need to do now is lift the foot and pivot the fabric around. Now if your machine doesn't have the function of having the needle stop in the down position, then you'll just need to use your hand wheel to put it into the down position. I'm going to stop and show you just my top and bottom layer. If I just lift that up, you'll see that they aren't lining up. So I'll just need to keep that in mind. Just make sure when I'm getting to the edge here that I'm coming in a bit so I'm picking up that bottom layer. Okay, so I can see my double pins coming up now, so this tells me that it'll be time to back stitch and finish off my sewing. Now we just need to repeat that with the other two pieces. Now that we've finished sewing all the edges, we need to cut off the excess wadding from around the sides. So I'm going to use my rotary cutter and ruler to do that. Okay, and once you've trimmed off all the excess wadding, just need to grab your scissors and snip off each of the corners. Just being careful not to snip through the sewing thread. Okay, and you just need to repeat that with the other two pages. Okay, now it's time to turn our pages the right side out. So what we'll need to do is find our little opening that we left when we were sewing them together, and going to need to very carefully turn the page out the right way, being careful not to rip the opening. And what I like to do is just get my stuffing tool, or you can use a chopstick or a pencil if you don't have a chopstick, and just get into the corners there and push them out. Okay, and there you have it. Now you just need to do that with the other two pages, and then once that's done, you'll need to give them a good press with the iron, and just making sure that when you do press it, you make sure you fold those bits in there and try and make them line up as best you can with the sewn edge. Okay, now that we've given all the pieces a nice press with the iron, we need to sew up our openings that are left. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a ladder stitch to sew up these openings. So if you're not sure how to do that, I'm going to show you now. So what you need to do is thread your needle. I'm just using the thread that I used in the sewing machine, and I put a knot at the end, in the end. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle in towards one of the ends of the opening, and I'm just going to try and hook under one of the stitches from the seam. Pull my thread through, and then just before you pull all the way through, just put your needle through the loop at the end, tight, and that will anchor it in there for you. Okay, I'm just going to turn this over. Now if you haven't noticed, I'm left-handed, so I'll be sewing from left to right. So if you're right-handed, you'll just be sewing in the opposite direction. Alright, so what you need to do, just make sure the little ends of the thread push down there, hiding. Okay, just directly above where you've anchored the thread in, just going to put the needle in. Make sure you're only going through one layer of fabric, and go through probably just under 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and then directly opposite in the other side, making sure you only go through one layer. Go through like so. just repeat that. So you'll find what you can see, the stitches are kind of looking like little rungs on a ladder. So every now and then, just give them a pull and they'll close the opening up and you'll hardly be able to see the thread at all. And just keep on going. Okay, when you get to the end of your opening, what I just like to do is try and get my needle under one of the stitches in the seam again. And then thread my needle through the loop and then pull it tight. So that's knotted it down there now. And then push my needle through the seam and out through the piece of fabric, and then just give it a gentle pull to bring that knot down into the seam and hide it down there. And there you have it. We've closed our seam up and you can hardly see the thread that you used to do it with. So now you just need to do this with the other 2 pages.